What do you think when you hear racing car? Probably something low, aggressive and built for speed, with massive aero and thousands of horsepower. And in BeamNG speedrunning that's exactly what wins. FCV Vivas with its smooth looks and sturdy suspension built for rallying. Scintilla with 2400 horsepower of pure domination. And Jayton, because turns out flying is faster than driving. These cars hold almost all records. But what if I told you that a boring front-engine 4-door family sedan managed to take several world records? This is not a supercar, not a rally god, and it doesn't have a rocket. A simple grandma car, and somehow it almost broke the meta. That is the story of the humble Ibishu Pessima. At first glance, this car looks like a nothing burger, a typical sedan without any redeemable features. It's not fast, pretty heavy, and far too weak to compete with the top vehicles. On paper, it shouldn't stand a chance. Even the name of the vehicle, Pessima, can be translated as terrible from Italian. This vehicle was added almost at the start of the game, back in 2015, and over the years got through several major updates, expanding tuning options and adding newer generations of cars. Even before Vivas and Scintilla, it was outshone by Hirochi's sleeker creations, the SBR4 and the Sunburst. And outside of the very rare cases where the game demanded players to use Pessima specifically, it was left in the garage, forgotten, collecting virtual dust. So when this car suddenly took a record from the meta monsters, the reaction was simple. How is this even possible? It all started back in 2024 with some time trials on Jungle Rock and one player, Sipari. This speedrunner had one goal: to showcase the power of Ibishu Pessima. Previously he spent a lot of time playing online, taking other players by surprise with a grandpa car that was believed to be weak. And for the base setup made specifically for multiplayer, speedrunning was hard. His first ever run on outside loop in Jungle Rock Island landed it second to last on the leaderboards. While far from great results, Sipari saw the potential and got to work. By stripping everything unnecessary from the default hill climb configuration, Sipari cut one of Pessima's biggest weaknesses: weight. Then came tuning. 11 years of updates had quietly filled the garage with new parts. In other words, it had a lot of tuning potential. After putting every big piece of aero in and installing nitros, this vehicle became a beast. While far from Scintilla's level with only 700 horsepower, it was on par or even better than FCV Vivas in every aspect, except the suspension. Ibishu Pessima simply can't hold itself together during bumps on a rough rally. Only two real drawbacks remain: torque steer, which is typical for front-engine cars, and rollover during tight corners. This new setup helped Sipari obliterate the previous outside loop record, beating the SBR4 by almost 4 seconds. Granted, not for long. 1.5 months later, Scintilla showed up and crushed it by 10. Sipari fought back and managed to improve his time by 3 more seconds, and even took down one of the weaker Scintilla records, but only one. Today, that run sits more than 20 seconds behind the Meta King. You see, the reality is, Scintilla is simply better than Pessima in every single aspect, except two: initial acceleration and the smaller size, which means the only realistic route where this car can outperform the current king is something akin to Akina Mountain, less straight and with a lot of corners. This is why when Sipari returned to the drawing board, he decided to look for exactly this. First hit on his list was again Jungle Rock Island, and the trial simply called Hill Climb. This challenge has a lot of corners and overall tricky terrain with constant elevation changes. In other words, a perfect place for Ibishu Pessima. It took Sipari several days of grinding to learn the map and get everything correctly, but in the end he managed to outperform Vivas by almost 1 second. Sadly, once again his record didn't stand the test of time. In several months, it was obliterated. This is the perfect place to see where exactly Pessima is both better and worse than the current champion. While initially Scintilla, driven by Yerner, gets far ahead, corners is where it loses time heavily, and the Bishu is catching up. Yet having barely a third of the power of the opponent is a clear problem. A 2-liter DOHC engine just can't fight 2400 horsepower forever. As of yet, Sipari's record was beaten only once, but by 2 whole seconds. This didn't stop Sipari, instead he tried harder to find a way to outperform the dreaded Scintilla. After all, BeamNG is home to hundreds of different trials and routes. Surely among them there should be some that will work, and eventually Sipari found them. 4 trials, 3 in Jungle Rock Island and 1 in Small Island, and in every single one the weak Pessima beats the current meta king. All 4 of these missions are pretty similar. Long, difficult routes with a lot of promising skips, which are usually extremely tough for Scintilla. Mixed Stage 2 at Small Island is the first on the list, and this trial is pretty strange, since it's rare for any single challenge to be forgotten by the community for several years straight. One of the problems was length. This is a 3-minute ride. Recently Scintilla finally claimed it. Wolf the Philosopher shaved off 3 seconds with small cuts and overall clean execution. The trial is pretty straightforward. Roads, sand and steel bushes, but the route itself has a lot of potential, especially with cuts. This is where Sipari saw an opening. By taking advantage of Pessima's surprisingly strong suspension, Sipari started cutting parts of the route that Scintilla simply couldn't survive. But that's not all. This route is extremely tough for glass cannon cars like Scintilla, so much so that Pessima was able to overtake it almost right after launch and keep that advantage till the end. With this, more than 10 seconds were saved, and the 3-minute barrier was shattered. Time to jump into Jungle Rock Island, where the Pessima claimed another 3 records, one of which is Mountain Stage. Remember Hill Climb? It's the same route, just twice as long. This trial has 2 clean problems: the start and the middle section. While the halfway point in this stage is just a skill check with the amount of tricky turns, start is a completely different story. In BeamNG, some time trials can be run in reverse. This can help preserve time via an overall easier pattern or open some shortcuts. Sipari learned the default hill climb, but funnily enough, reversed mountain stage start is located at the same place. On the other hand, SYV, trusting his instincts, decided to try the default pass. At the end, however, that trust was worth exactly 1 second, and that 1 second was enough. Peninsula stage is up next, and it's pretty unique, since skips in Jungle Rock Island are rare to say the least. This trial is pretty similar to the others, a lot of elevation changes and corners. But there is a twist. A small loop in the middle of the route opens a ridiculous shortcut, one that requires near pixel perfect precision. Interestingly, this skip is not the reason why Pessima managed to win. In fact, it was slower than Scintilla for half of the race. On every straight, Scintilla would stretch the gap, but in every corner, Pessima would claw it back. At the end, however, it all came down to precision. One final corner followed by a chicane. Sipari was faster by half a second. Port Shakedown is up next, and it's nothing like previous trials. There are no hills and it's not that long. This is a drive through a port. Narrow pathways and a lot of tight corners. Great trial, especially for Pessima. Here, Ibishu Pessima managed to hold its ground against 2 different players with Scintillas. Let's compare faster runs. Versus skill, Sipari was going neck and neck. He used Pessima's stronger suspension on the initial launch and managed to perform a quick skip and pull ahead, but the following straight erased any advantage. After that, it was a skill competition. Every corner, Pessima gained. Every straight, Scintilla pulled back. Down to the final corner and straight, both cars were dead even. But a slightly better final corner from Sipari made the finish possible, overtaking skill by almost 3/10. It's always a pleasure to see weak cars dominate the established meta vehicles, but don't fool yourself. After testing nearly half of all trials in the game, Sipari managed to conquer only these 4. Sure, there are still a lot of trials that have potential, but reality is, shorter trials where Ibishu Pessimo might have had a chance already dominated by Jato, and longer ones by Shantilla. In the future, all Pessima records will be beaten. And while I am sure Sipari will not go down without a good fight, the loss is all but guaranteed. But for the time being, we can enjoy a nice showcase of how a car called weak, old, and not a race material can dominate monsters with 3 times its power. Thank you for watching, let me know your thoughts, any feedback is very much welcome. Join Discord if you want to chat, and don't forget to leave a like and comment. I am Molten Metal Mayhem, and I'll see you next time.